don't have to wait for somebody to follow. Maybe like I need to just step up and fill that spot and use my voice in the best possible way that I could.
Hello and welcome to the Ocean Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Silverwood, and here we are in mid-August 2021, which means we've just launched the Ocean Impact Pitch Fest 2021 just over a week ago. And hopefully you've caught the news and you've seen just how much this campaign this year is bigger and better than ever before. Even though it is only our second year, the total cash prize pool this year is up to $150,000, including $50,000 for the overall Pitch Fest winner. There's another $150,000 worth of product and support from OIO and our partners. And of course, there's the new addition this year, the HP Generation Impact Incubator, a special new program designed to support 35 and under Australian residing innovators on a mission to improve the health of planet Ocean. So there really is so much on offer this year. Go to the website, check out all the divisions, and make sure you get your applications in. Applications close on the 21st of September, but you have to do 2 steps. You've got to get your written form in as soon as possible. You'll then get notified to start working on your up to 3-minute pitch video. So I cannot stress this enough, folks. Get your written application in soon. You can apply to Pitch Fest 2021 from anywhere in the world. It's only the Generation Impact Incubator where you need to be residing here in Australia. And if you've got some questions about the programs this year, we're actually going to be releasing next week on the podcast a conversation with myself and my co-founder Nick Shirelli that we recorded on our Instagram Live. So if you're impatient, you can go to Instagram Live at oceanimpact.org and listen to the interview where we answer a lot of your different questions. Now, on to the podcast this week. We took a break last week, which was because that was the launch of Pitch Fest, but we are back with a brilliant conversation with Belinda Baggs, who is the co-founder of Surfers for Climate, an old friend of mine, a huge ally in all things ocean conservation. She describes herself as a surfer, a mother, and an ocean lover, and my gosh, is she that. She's a global sports activist with Patagonia, and she is adding her weight to so many important campaigns at the moment, notably in the area where I live and OIO is based, is the Stop PEP 11 campaign. This is a proposed natural gas reserve off the coast of Australia on the east coast between Newcastle and Sydney. This entire stretch of the east coast of Australia so far doesn't have any offshore petroleum projects, but they want this to be the first, and we are deeply concerned about the impact it will have on the area, on natural wildlife, on the migration route of very important marine creatures, and of course the precedent it will set for other areas. She was also, Belinda, out protesting in Victoria just this last weekend, talking about what's happening off the coast of King Island, where they have just commenced seismic blasting to look for natural gas and other petroleum reserves down there, and we don't have to look very far into the scientific literature to see the devastating impact that seismic blasting has on innocent creatures, and not to mention the way it can affect livelihoods around certain marine industries. So we've got a real problem on our hands, folks. The petroleum companies out there are still looking at ways to dig up our nation, our reserves, as they are all around the world, to fuel our insatiable appetite for petroleum. A lot of it ends up as plastic, a lot of it ends up as energy, right when we need a shift away from fossil fuels. The IPCC report that was released only a week ago was another confounding piece of evidence at how dire and diabolical the state is headed towards, the trajectory that we are on. So we simply have to act. Hopefully I have your support when I say things like that. So this conversation with Belinda is really all about how one incredible surfer, one beautiful human, can take it upon herself to say, the ocean, yes, it will always be my playground and my special place, but it will also be the reason why I surf for climate action and for all sorts of other environmental justice causes. So I thank you, Belinda, for all that you do, for your friendship, and for the incredible way you bring others into the journey towards ocean conservation. I've chatted for 5 minutes. I should probably wrap it up and let you get on to this week's episode of the Ocean Impact Podcast. Can't take the ocean out of me. And there she is. Hello, Belinda.
Hi, how you going, Tim?
I'm so good. It's always great when the technology works, isn't it?
It's amazing. It worked, yay.
Right on cue. We had a little brief call before just to make sure we knew what buttons to press, so we can give ourselves a little high five.
Yes, I can stop sweating now.
Yeah, I was just actually telling everyone there that you would be tuning in from the southern coastline of Australia down in Victoria. So why don't we start the conversation there? Tell us a little bit about where you are tuning in from today and a little bit about that part of the world and what it means to you.
Sure. So I'm calling in now from Wadawurrung country, which is also known as Victoria's Surf Coast. It's such a beautiful and spectacular area. I grew up in Newcastle, but I moved here probably almost a decade ago now. I was drawn here for, I guess, a multiple array of reasons, which started with Patagonia, is based in Torquay. So I work for Patagonia, for anybody who doesn't know. So that was very convenient. I also had quite a few friends down here who I'd often come and visit and say, oh, can I sleep on your couch for, 2 weeks or a week, and end up staying 2 months. So I think eventually I was like, all right, I've been couch surfing long enough, and I need to establish some roots here. The surf was probably the biggest draw card for me other than work and friends. I love the fact that there's such a huge variety of waves down here. Like on any given day, I can be out on my longboard, and then go around the corner 20-30 minutes up down the coast and be scared out of my wits. So it's just such a good combination of surf here.
So good. And we'll talk a little bit more about surfing and your incredible prowess and achievements there in a moment. But yeah, for those people joining in for the first time who haven't heard about Belinda Baggs before, she is, of course, a surfer, mother, ocean lover. She's a global sports activist with Patagonia, and she's also the co-founder of Surfers for Climate. So we're going to do our best to talk about a whole bunch of really cool stuff today. So very important to acknowledge as well that I'm certainly today tuning in from Guringai country up on the northern beaches of Sydney, and to pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded on this land. So Belinda, tell us a little bit about surfing for you. You mentioned before you grew up in Newcastle. You've obviously achieved a huge amount through your surfing skills, and now in life these great achievements as an activist and communicator. But tell us a little bit about surfing. Where did it all start for you, and how did your journey into it begin, and where did it take you?
Oh, well, it's a very long story because I remember almost every wave that I've ever caught. So my dad's a surfer, a very keen surfer. And so I grew up with that beach lifestyle deeply embedded into our everyday. And I think just through that, it was a natural progression that I either became a professional sandcastle builder or I learned to surf. So the waves in Newcastle, I don't know if many of you listeners are there, Tim, you're familiar. It gets quite a bit of swell in comparison to a lot of other areas on that east coast, and also has quite a horrendous shore break at times. So I spent the beginning years of my childhood battling with that shore break and getting washed back in, tossed and turned, and continually waiting for those smaller days. And so I could actually get out past it and sort of like advance my surfing and try to actually ride some swells rather than just getting tossed around, which I at the time would swear so much about, but I'm so very thankful for now, because it's kind of given me this deeper appreciation of, I guess, the power that the ocean possesses, and also just a huge respect for anybody who succeeds at riding waves, because the pursuit of doing so is so damn hard. I also feel like was very privileged to grow up with a father who surfs and surfs so well. To have that to draw back upon, like, I'm so cherished that I'm now a second generation surfer and have been able to draw upon all his wisdom of the ocean, everything from, don't paddle out there, paddle out over here, watch the way the currents go, I often, even though my father's quite a performance orientated surfer, I often still see similarities in our surfing when I watch some video footage and stuff like that together. So just having that knowledge to draw upon has been just something that I cherish and am so very thankful for. When I finally accomplished getting out the back, my goal as a surfer has always been to be able to surf every day at your local conditions. So, I don't aspire to go and surf Jaws. I've had a couple of opportunities where I've been able to push my limits and test, riding bigger waves. And I realized very quickly that it's something that I don't want to do. I'm way too scared in anything over like 8 to 10 feet. But I really want to be able to surf the waves that your local beach produces on an everyday basis. And that kind of put me in a position where I started looking at different types of equipment, because I never really felt like I excelled riding a shortboard, like a standard, 6 foot or 5'11" thruster shortboard. And so I started longboarding a lot, which was incredible. I learned how to ride a heavy single fin log, pre-2000, which was kind of unheard of in Australia at the time. And I absolutely loved that. But as we all know, they don't work in every condition. So I've sort of just tried to vary my equipment and as much as I possibly can in order to ride waves on a daily basis. And that includes body surfing as well. So, my favorite longboard right now, I've got a Nettleton 9.3 with like a single fin that I love surfing when it's, under shoulder high. I have another Nettleton mid-length that I'm absolutely in love with, and it makes my every session like so much better. It's a little 6'4" kind of mid-length egg. And I have an FCD that I guess you'd call it as a step up type board that I sort of push my boundaries on. And if it's too big to surf on that, then I won't be going out. And I body surf when it's too hollow. So
you've got all bases covered.
Exactly.
So when you started realizing this attraction to longboarding, and you mentioned those heavy glass single fin longboards, tell us a little bit about that, because that's obviously where you really grew into someone very, very notable the world over, and you featured in a huge amount of surfing films and campaigns, and obviously got sponsorship along the way. So tell us a little bit about how that came into be your, I suppose, your dominant expression, and the kind of opportunities that created for you.
Yeah. So, little diving backwards a little bit into surf history of the time of when I grew up, which, I learned how to surf in the 90s predominantly. Everything in Australia was very performance orientated. So even longboards at the time were predominantly thrusters or the 2+1 fin setup. And the only exposure that I really had to that, logging style of surfing was watching guys ride old mouths, so boards that were shaped in the 60s. The first time I went to California, which was such an amazing experience, I went with a quiver of tri-fin high performance longboards, got to Malibu and was like, my boards don't work. Oh my God. This is terrible. And I was just mesmerized by watching all the incredible surfers there riding heavy single fin logs, which I hadn't really been exposed to in Australia yet, except for I think Jimmy Gamboa may have done a trip out to Australia, and Tom Wagner was also like moving to Australia at the time. So there was a little bit of influence, but it wasn't something that I was kind of exposed to quite frequently. And I was watching Jimmy surf out of Malibu alongside Dane Peterson, Carla Rowland, Cassia was out there, like a bunch of incredible surfers. And I was just seeing them nose ride through these sections, and the expression on their faces after every ride was just, I couldn't explain it. It was like I could just see something, and that they were getting out of surfing that I wasn't experiencing. And so I spent the entire summer there riding a really old single fin log shaped by Scott Anderson that had actually been pulled out of the bottom of Dane's house. It was covered in dust and dirt and crap, all delaminated, but it was like, that was my green machine, and I was going to learn to log on it. And I was so determined just to be able to experience this sensation that I was watching all these amazing surfers experience. And, you know, after about, 300 dings later, lots of nosedives and pearls, I eventually did get to feel that sensation, and it was better than I could have ever imagined. It just felt like gliding across a section on the nose was like riding the updraft of the wave that you see the pelicans gliding along the surface, riding that updraft. Just such a weightless, amazing feeling that I was hooked. And so I just started logging ever since. I buried myself in it for probably a good part of my 20s. I lived in Byron and in Noosa, kind of chasing that elusive nose riding wave. I have some regrets at the time, which was probably selfishly choosing surfing over a lot of family occasions, which I've learned over the years that probably was an amazing thing to do. But at the same time, all those surf sessions and time in the water has provided me with just this deep, deep appreciation for the ocean and nature.
Yeah, and we'll get to the outcomes of that deep appreciation very soon. So when I was thinking back pre-podcast, that when I first sort of met you, little did you didn't know me when I first met, or at least saw you in person. I think it would have been maybe about Noosa Festival of Surfing. I'm guessing it was around 2004, 2003, maybe. I don't know if you can remember a year when you would have been there. Maybe you were there every year, but
I was definitely there during those years.
Yeah, so I would have been up there with my crew of wannabe loggers from the Central Coast, with Ryan Haywood and Kerry Down and Simon, and we were just absolutely in awe. I think that same year, though, a whole crew that Ryan Haywood had kind of connected with, the California crew, came and stayed in the Central Coast for a while, and it was just, we were loving it because we'd been absolute devotees of Thomas Campbell's films, Seedling and Sprout the Present. And so to be there, see these people like yourself and Dane ripping it up, was just an absolutely mind-blowing experience. But when can you recall meeting me for the first time? I'm thinking it might have been around maybe the Byron Surf Festival or something quite a few years later on.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a couple of years later on. I do vaguely remember meeting you with Ryan at one of those Noosa festivals, and then kind of learning more about Take 3, and sort of learning more and more about the environment, and then like looking at you as this higher power. And when we did reconnect at the Byron Surf Festival, I was so nervous because I was meeting one of my heroes.
How funny is that? Life does some weird little twists and turns and dances, doesn't it? Here I am idolizing you and your incredible, crew, and everyone surfing, and then it goes full circle. But let's talk a little bit about that then. So Take 3 for the Sea was really starting to hit its stride for a while there, and we really made a lot of momentum and a name for ourselves in, I suppose, this alternative surfing community. And that was in no part thanks to people like you joining as an ambassador and being an incredible advocate for us. So, what was it about Take 3 for the Sea that impressed you, and what were those early years like as an ambassador?
Oh, so many things. Like, I think like, as I mentioned earlier, growing up in Newcastle, I spent a lot of time on the beach watching Dad when it was too big for me to surf myself. And so I sort of, as a way to give back to the ocean and hope that I'd have more time in the water. Like, if I collect all this plastic, maybe tomorrow it'll reward me by being 3 foot smaller and I can get out the back. So I used to spend all my time in between watching Dad picking up rubbish off the shore. And I, eventually came across yourself and Take 3 and was so excited that there was now a movement created around this and something that I felt like I could be part of, which I was just so thankful for. It was incredible, and like meeting other people like yourself and learning more about not just picking rubbish up off the beach and throwing it in the bin. It was like the deeper research behind it, the greater impacts that it can obviously have on our marine life, but like studies, not just my own assumptions. So that was really incredible. And I think as well, like, it was such a tangible action to ask surfers particularly to do, was like, hey, just pick up 3 pieces of rubbish every time you leave the beach. It's like a no-brainer. Of course you're going to do that. Like, why wouldn't we? We want to keep our oceans pristine. And so it was just amazing to be working with you, learning from you, and of course trying to just push the good cause of Take 3.
So you mentioned there, obviously, you had this beautiful innate qualities, and I remember being the same as a young surfer and going to the ocean and feeling that compulsion, that urge to remove these unsightly and, little did I know how dangerous they were. They were really just unsightly. They didn't belong there. But then I suppose looking at how you grew into becoming more of an advocate and using your voice, maybe we can just go on a little bit of a conversation tangent there around what that's been like for you, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are, maybe they're quite well progressed on their journey towards realizing the strength of their voice and becoming an advocate or an activist. But maybe give us a little bit more into your journey, what that was like, strengthening your voice, and what it felt like to see others responding to your activism.
For sure. Firstly, I'd like to say that I'm completely socially awkward and very anxious. So learning to use my voice was not easy at all. As I said, I've always looked up to people like yourself, Hugo at Surfers Against Sewage over in the UK, and really kind of aspired and I guess respected what you guys were doing more than anything else, but sort of thought, well, this is what I want to do too. Like, this is my dream right here. Imagine being able to protect the ocean, and that's what you do. Like, that's absolutely incredible. And so I think just as my surfing advanced, I never like to say it, but I guess getting some type of profile behind me where people wanted to watch my surfing, and maybe even interested about what I had to say from time to time, I was like, oh, great. Like, instead of talking just about myself, let's use this opportunity to plug the environment as well. And so, yes, I was definitely nervous at the start, speaking out on issues and kind of hoping that, people were interested, but at the same time, always had this little like message in the back of my mind that was saying, it doesn't matter if people are interested because you believe in these things and these are the things that are important to you. And so that was sort of a way that prompted me to overcome any anxieties or, negative thoughts that I had on the issue, was just knowing that, if I didn't step up, who was going to? Like, I was kind of always waiting for that one person that I could follow. And obviously having such great role models like you leading the charge, realizing that maybe I don't have to wait for somebody to follow. Maybe like I need to just step up and fill that spot and use my voice in the best possible way that I could.
And so you started doing that, and then is the sense that you just get a little bit more confident with each new experience and each new challenge, and then that just gives you a platform to take it to the next level?
I think so. I think it's definitely a combination of getting more confident the more that you speak up and use your platform for good. Also a matter of learning as I go. there's obviously so many different elements in when you talk about the climate crisis or any environmental issues, from picking up plastic off the beach to trying to stop offshore fossil fuel developments, or just an array of things that are kind of overwhelming at times. But the more you learn about stuff, also the more confident you become on speaking of them. And I think I've also gotten older as the years have gone on. Well, not I think I have. I've definitely gotten older as the years gone on, and realized that our time on this planet is very limited. And so I don't want to waste time beating around the bush. I want to talk about the things that matter and make as big of an impact and difference as I possibly can.
I love that. And I'm sure there's many people listening and tuning in around the world who feel the same way, and particularly in younger generations. And I know obviously you're a mother, and it's a huge motivator having children, but also just looking and listening to younger generations and realizing the sense of urgency that they have. It certainly fires me up, and I'm already doing a lot, but it makes me want to do more. So yeah, we might come back in a minute and talk a little bit about, obviously there is consequences to this and using your voice, and the negatives, and that you do need to either have a thick skin or know how to dodge and duck certain criticisms and challenges that come your way. But I wanted to just quickly maybe talk a little bit more about sort of Patagonia as a brand. This role that you've been able to have now as a global sports activist. I mean, sounds really cool. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your role and Patagonia more broadly.
Sure. It is really cool. And it also comes with explanation, because most people are like, what does that even mean? And I'm like, to be completely honest, I still don't know, but I love it. We're all aware, like, Patagonia is a very extremely environmental conscious company. I've been an ambassador of theirs for probably about 15 years now, which is quite some time. My journey there started testing wetsuits and surf products. It was actually a contact to the Malloys through Thomas Campbell, who they were at the time looking for a female who could test surf gear, as Patagonia was starting to move into that realm of making surf products. And they're like, oh, we can't necessarily afford the top pro female surfer that's on the tour, but we really just want somebody who spends a lot of time in the water. And I think a couple of friends had said to them, well, nobody surfs more than Bindi. So if you want the products tested for longevity and endurance, then you should talk to Bindi. So that was the start of my journey with Patagonia. Since then, obviously stuck with the ambassador program. I've learned a lot from them about, an array of things, environmental issues, water quality, and also really how the products that we wear affect the planet. I worked with them for quite some time doing social media. So I was sitting at an office and at a desk with the amazing marketing team at the Patagonia Australia office in Torquay, learning as much as I can, and working their social media account, Instagram, Twitter, etc., which was great, but definitely frustrating at times, as everybody that I worked with knew that I loved to complain when the wind was offshore, and the wind's offshore most of the time in winter in Victoria. So eventually, I think a combination of that and me spending the majority of my free time when I wasn't in the water working on their environmental campaigns as a passion project, they put two and two together and was like, all right, Bindi, we'd love to be able to provide you with a role where your environmental activism and passion for the environment intersects with your surfing. And so now I work with Patagonia on not just their environmental campaigns, but also sort of allows me time to work on my own passion projects and things that they see being really important, but potentially something that they can't cover as an actual business. So
amazing. Yeah, and we love them as a brand, and all that they enable and empower people like you, and also all those incredible organizations that receive grants, that receive support. We've been fortunate enough to have support from Patagonia. So yeah, just an incredible organization. So speaking about some of those environmental campaigns that you really started to sink your teeth into and start to champion, what were they? And maybe this is a bit of a segue into some of the big ones that you've been involved with over the years.
Yeah, I guess primarily I really dove in when they started working on the Fight for the Bite. Patagonia was, part of a huge cohort of people and groups and businesses who were all working on that, obviously led by the Great Australian Bite Alliance, and living on a part of the coastline that was, set to be affected if there was an oil spill. We all seen that disastrous oil spill modelling. I thought, I have to step up and do my bit, and so was working alongside amazing people on that issue, which was a victory. We kicked Equinor out. A couple of other companies previously have given up their licenses to the zone. Santos just abandoned their license, so that's so far so good. Seems like we're in a really good place with that one, which sort of just segued into a lot of other areas that were under threat that I didn't know about, and I don't think a lot of other surfers knew about either. PEP 11, which is Petroleum Exploration Permit 11, which is 4,500 square kilometres of coastline from Newcastle all the way down to the Sydney Harbour, so like the Manly region. And there's currently Asset Energy is trying to extend their license there in the area and reach out and do exploratory drilling. Surfrider has been hugely backing that campaign. I'm sure everybody saw the paddle outs that happened throughout Newcastle, Central Coast, Sydney, and then another one up in Byron a few months ago. And stay tuned, because they're about to launch another part of that campaign with some town halls. So if you are not aware of it, jump on over to the Surfrider Foundation Australia Instagram account and read up on that, what's going on there, and stay up to date. So I think that was another one that was just really close to my heart. Obviously, growing up in Newcastle, the thought of having oil wells out there or gas drilling out there was just too much to bear. So jumped on board and tried to help as much as I possibly can. And fast forward now to 2021, I've learned that there's this process with the government that's an annual acreage release process where they literally open up huge swaths of ocean and allow these companies to bid on them every year. It's an endless cycle, and at that stage of the process, there's really no consideration for environment, climate. There's no traditional owner engagement. It's sort of just really like, who wants this? Great, we'll get to the other stuff, next, after you've already identified that you want to drill here. And that's not okay. Not in 2021 when we're in a climate emergency. We need to be thinking of these things ahead of time and protecting, our oceans as much as we can. And so the 2021 acreage release included 7 giant areas in the Otway Basin, which is a stone's throw away from where I live now, and a really prized and pristine surfing area. So Surfers for Climate is working on a bit of a campaign to stop that as much as we can and try and get those 7 acreages removed. One of which, I must mention, is directly behind the 12 Apostles Marine Park. So it's a little bit outlandish.
Yeah. And I want to obviously get to Surfers for Climate, the organisation which you co-founded relatively recently in the whole scheme of your environmental journey. But maybe just go back a little bit to Fight for the Bite, and acknowledging that people might be tuning into the podcast from around the world. So maybe sort of set the scene a little bit more around Australia. You could even go into a bit more context around our relationship with offshore oil and gas extraction. And then obviously opening up this particular campaign that really hit a vein with Australians, and I think led by the surfing community and the ocean-loving community, which is certainly the first time in my generation. Maybe that and the super trawlers campaign that happened just before it really ignited something special in the Australian surfing population and around the world, which is amazing and is certainly being harnessed day to day with all those other campaigns that you mentioned. But yeah, maybe let's go back a little bit more to Fight for the Bite and set the scene a little bit there.
Yeah, I get ahead of myself. I get buried in this stuff, and so
I love it.
sorry about that.
That's good.
So the Fight for the Bite is oil. It was a proposed oil drilling site in the Great Australian Bight, in excessively deep and treacherous oceans. The roaring 40s rip through there with, such power and intensity, seeing just massive open ocean swells. There'd been a few companies prior, I think the fight started in about 2014 or 16 or something like that. BP was the first company that sort of eyed off the area. They pulled out. Chevron also was looking at the area. They pulled out, and I'm sure there was a couple others that I'm forgetting. But fast forward, we get up to Equinor, which is a Norwegian company over in Norway, who were looking at oil drilling in the Great Australian Bight. They put in their environment plans. The spill modelling showed the potential to have oil on beaches from Albany in Western Australia, right around the southern coastline of Australia, up the east coast to Port Macquarie, stretching, over to Tasmania, and even reaching some of the western shores of New Zealand. And I think that spill modelling alone was enough to sort of ignite the entire Australian surf community, that there was no way we were going to risk our beautiful, pristine coastline for, oil drilling, a fuel that we don't need in 2021.
Yeah, that's right. And I think this has been something which is obviously being harnessed now for these other emerging campaigns. The big one around here, as you mentioned before, the PEP 11 zone, the exploration license extends off the coast of where OIO is based in Manly. And, the thought of having these areas, I grew up in this area just like you, Bindi, and the thought of having oil and gas wells out there extracting fossil fuels that, to your point, the world has still got a very thirsty hunger for oil and gas, but there's enough technologies now and enough opportunities in Australia that we need to be setting our sights on renewable energies and leaving the fossil fuels in the ground. So, yeah, let's talk then a little bit about Surfers for Climate. So, you obviously weren't quite satisfied with all your roles in being ambassadors for this and advocates for that and being supported by Patagonia. You saw an opportunity to start your own organisation, and then you found the right co-founder to do it. Why don't you give us a little glimpse into the why and the how you set up Surfers for Climate?
Sure. So co-founder of Surfers for Climate is Johnny Abegg, who's an incredible, awesome, special human, also a fellow goofy footer, I'd like to add in. We were on a workshop type trip up in Heron Island. The Climate Council was there presenting, and we just came back after that trip, both Johnny and I, with this new knowledge about how climate was really already affecting our oceans, our coastlines, our reefs, and, in turn, our waves, and kind of learning more about the future threats that we face as surfers. We both left the trip with the exact same idea, which was, hey, let's start an organization that really focuses on this exact topic, which is surfing and climate. Johnny rang me a couple of weeks into it and was like, so I've been thinking, like, maybe we should set up an organization, Surfers for Climate. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the best idea, because I just registered the name Surfers for Climate Action, but yours is actually better and more succinct. So let's just go with that. So we've been working together for the past year on SFC. We're basically a sea roots movement dedicated to empowering and mobilising surfers for positive climate action. We kind of operate under, really core values of inclusivity, and respecting the country that we're on, all surfers, and sort of loving and caring about one another and the earth. we really want to focus on solutions-based ideas, and obviously stopping offshore fossil fuel exploration, and not sort of disregarding the power of politics as well. So sort of jumping a little bit into that political world, which is a little bit out of my depth sometimes, but I'm so glad that I have a fantastic team that I'm working with that can guide me through it.
Speaking of that team, I'm pretty excited to see that Joshua Kirkman, who has been really formative in helping OIO in the early days and a great old mate of mine, has joined the ranks. That's pretty exciting.
Oh, Josh is absolutely incredible. I feel like since he's been with us the last couple of weeks, everyone's spirits are so much higher and we're pushing ahead at such a quicker pace. I'm exceptionally unorganized, so having Josh on board just to not only share his knowledge and fill the holes, fill the holes in the gaps where we were maybe like struggling. He's really like helped out in just such an array of issues. It's like my heart goes out. So thankful, and I've also surfed with Josh and watched him get barreled. So I can't wait till we can meet up in real life and share a surf session together as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't mind mixing up the craft either. He's his
No.
prowess on a bodyboard, he's body surfing, and then also stand up. So he's definitely an all round legend, that one.
Yeah.
While we're talking about Surfers for Climate, like maybe just go into some of those call for actions for people that are listening in. Obviously, go to the website and you'll get really amazed with the great stuff you've got there on your social channels. But what are you really hoping and encouraging people that, whether they're surfers or they're not surfers, they just care about these issues? What are you encouraging them to do?
So at the moment, we have a few things up on our website. One of them is a Wipe Out Your Emissions campaign. So really looking at our own emissions that we're creating from surfing, our gear, our travel, even just our everyday trips to the beach, respecting First Nations, and really making sure that we dive deep into that knowledge and have a greater understanding of that. So there's a section there on Wipe Out Your Emissions that has some great tips on all those things, including divesting your super and banking, which is a really, really powerful thing to do. And another thing that I've been buried in for the last, seems like years now, but I'm sure it's just a couple of months, is working on this Otway Basin gas issue. So there's a petition there called Flip the Bird at Fossil Fools. Would absolutely love if everybody's on this call can jump on and sign up. We have big plans and aspirations to try and kick new gas development out of the Otway Basin. And Josh, who I threw him completely in the deep end when he started working with us, is currently working on a bit of a strategy for an election campaign. It might sound really boring to think politics, but we've got some great creatives in the works, so stay tuned for that, with the general underlying message of voting for the climate, because now more than ever we need our politicians on board making decisions for us that will better everything for the future.
Love it. Well, there's some calls for action for you, whether you're a surfer or not. You can go and add your voice, and certainly follow the journey of Surfers for Climate.
Totally. So and I just like to add to that, surfer, Tim. We consider at SFC anybody who's ridden a wave is a surfer. So no matter what you ride, whether it's a sup, a bodyboard, a shortboard, a longboard, and maybe you don't even ride anything at all and you just like body surf or swim or beach walk, you're one of us. So
I like it. So theoretically, you could go out into the ocean on a small day and just lift your feet up off the sand, let the wave push you just a little bit, and you can label yourself a surfer.
That's right. Yeah.
As long as you got a smile on you, if you got a smile on your dial, then we love you. That's great. I want to sort of go back a little bit there, because you opened a little bit of a window into thinking about innovation, and particularly looking at the surf industry. I know that some of the political figures who we have a bit of trouble with, they do love to pull out that card that here the surfers are trying to be all high and mighty, saying no to fossil fuel extraction, yet it's such a plasticized sport. So yeah, where are you at when you start thinking about innovation and how we as surfers can really start to lead on showing that, look, we want to be proactive into better materials for a better future, but we're a little bit hamstrung while the giant petrochemical companies rule the roost, so to speak. So, yeah, where do you sort of sit on that, and maybe a bit of a conversation about innovation and where that intersects with OIO's mission?
Totally. Well, I think first and foremost, our everydays are still dependent on fossil fuels, unfortunately. If we want to live within the current constraints of society in an affordable manner. Whilst there are, a lot of amazing alternatives that exist, it's just a matter of like propping them up and into the mainstream. So we don't any longer need to be dependent on fossil fuels. And that goes with our everyday and also with surfing specifically. Yourself, there's some amazing technology that's being implemented in the surf industry. Patagonia, obviously, with the Ulex wetsuits, like that's just such a game changer. Like you're out there surfing now wrapped in tree sap, which is absolutely incredible.
Very toasty in the process.
It is a toasty process. And I've been to the Ulex rainforest in Sri Lanka where they get the rubber from, and it's so incredible to like watch this tree literally get spiked, all this sap come out, they walk it up a hill to the factory, mix it with some water and agitate it a bunch, and then all of a sudden you have rubber, and then that's your wetsuit. Like
amazing.
We no longer need to drill for this, so that's incredible. There's obviously a lot of alternatives with surfboard construction out there. Some of them may not be 100% perfect yet, but it's definitely a huge step in the right direction. And the more and more resources that we can put towards this, the better off we're going to be. And yeah, I think it's just a message, just to share a message to all surfers, is that like these products exist. Go find them. Even wax, like there's two amazing wax companies here in Australia, Good Surf Wax and Sticky Pronk, that are making sustainable surf wax that's made out of natural biodegradable products. So there's so many alternatives now. It's just a matter of stepping out of that mainstream and actually seeking these products out. And that's why organizations like you, Tim, are so amazing to help a lot of these smaller startup companies, whether it be in surfing or in blue carbon world, to sort of really succeed.
Yeah, and tell me about it. I mean, I'm frothing as much as I froth when I'm ready to go for a pumping surf about the opportunities out there. And obviously we're on the front line receiving applications from startups and entrepreneurs and people that have just got great ideas, and there's no shortage of them. It really is back to sort of what I was saying before, where we're in a bit of a hamstrung state where the status quo is just literally drenched and drowned in this cheap material which has such negative consequences to it. But you give humans a bit of an opportunity to use their ingenuity, and you find certain people who are early adopters who have the privilege and the means to support these innovators to let their ideas come to life, then the market will most certainly adopt them, because most people out there, if there's an option to vote with your wallet and cause less harm to people on the planet, they will take that, as long as it's not cost prohibitive. No one wants to be doing bad in this day and age.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, I think it's just so important that organizations like OIO are providing these small startups with an opportunity to go big, which is incredible, and it's what we need. So, from you to the consumers out there, let's get behind them and make it succeed.
Yeah, and on that, I mean, you'll be listening to this podcast if you tune in when we release it. With Pitchfest being live, it launches on the 10th of August and runs to the 21st of September. So $50,000 cash prize for the winner this year, which is a pretty big step up from our first year of running the Pitchfest. And so we just can't wait to see all the incredible innovations that come in from across planet Ocean, who all, I think, are united in wanting to ensure the ocean remains healthy and abundant, or at least is restored, because it's in a pretty bad state at the moment. So, Bindi, back over to you. We're probably going to wrap up the podcast pretty soon, but how about, just some sort of closing words or some thoughts that you wanted to get to today that you didn't have a chance to talk about as yet?
Oh, I think you pretty much covered most of it, but I guess I just echo your last sentiment, which is you know, everybody out there wants to protect the ocean now. Why wouldn't we? So let's work together, unite. You know, together we're stronger. Act local, think global, as much as we possibly can. If you go to the beach every day, protecting that one specific beach or area of coastline is now our responsibility. So let's all work together to do as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Belinda Baggs, I've loved having you as a friend and as a fellow activist as we do our little part on this big planet ocean. So yeah, I thank you so much for all that you do and wish you the best of luck with all your great work with Surfers for Climate and beyond. And thanks for tuning in today, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, OIO.
Thanks, everyone.